When I was a teenager growing up on an Indiana farm, my political hero was a New York senator named Robert Kennedy. I loved Robert Kennedy. I admired his courage. I loved his candor. I revered the passion he devoted to his cause and the energy he gave to his crusade. Senator Kennedy forced a nation to confront problems it needed to address. Malnourished children in Mississippi, people of color who suffered from the sting of discrimination, orphans living in filthy ghettos, an ill-strategized war that had cost 58,000 Americans their lives. To me, he was the epitome of what a public servant should be, grounded in strongly held beliefs, ever willing to abide his principles, fearless in the face of adversity. A man unafraid to bully the bullies, who never wavered from his convictions and refused to equivocate on his principles. Robert Kennedy also cautioned that a bigger, colder federal government was not the solution to every problem. He believed in the power and dignity of the individual over the state. He warned that no federal bureaucracy could ever be a substitute for individual responsibility. Those are not the words of a statist. Quite the opposite. They are profoundly conservative. In fact, at one point, Ronald Reagan joked that Bobby was stealing his ideas. My father was raised in Indiana during the Great Depression, and he's a lifelong Democrat, a farmer, and proud of it. He served his state more than 2 decades as a legislator and was the Democratic nominee for governor in 1984. Always patient with my questions. My father gave me an early education in government and policy, and to my dad goes the credit for nurturing my interest in politics and public speaking. My dad raised me to be a Democrat, and I worked for several during the early years of my career. One of those I admired was Daniel Patrick Moynihan. The Pat Moynihan that I knew proudly defended the United States of America and never wavered in his support of our greatest ally in the Middle East. He would have not tolerated any president who dared treat Israel as an adversary. He was a fierce advocate for New York and never believed that climbing the leadership ladder inside the U.S. Senate should come at the expense of his own state. Over time, however, it became clear to me that the Democratic Party of my father, Robert Kennedy and Pat Moynihan, is not the party of Nancy Pelosi, Dave Patterson, or Chuck Schumer. I was in my 30s when I found a new intellectual home in the conservative movement of the Reagan years. My heroes became Thatcher, Churchill, Reagan, Buckley, stalwart spirits all, unafraid to sail against the prevailing winds of their time. I was 17 when I first met New York. I won a statewide speech contest in my home state of Indiana, and the reward was a trip to New York City. I knew the minute I stepped off that bus that New York would someday be my home. I could feel the energy in my feet. I inhaled the culture and the diversity and the sea of humanity around me, the arts, the music, the commerce, a place that seemed to be a magnet for the best and the brightest. I looked around and thought, yes, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. I lived upstate as a Cornell University graduate student. I lived in the city and slept on an office couch during the early years of my career. For the past 20 years, I have lived in the bucolic Hudson Valley in a picturesque village named Cornwall-on-Hudson. I may be an immigrant to New York, but I am no stranger to New York, or its people, or the opportunity this state once offered, or the promise it can once again. It is in New York that I started and grew a successful business, advising public figures on politics and policy. Married a beautiful woman named Rebecca, the mother of our 3 sons. It is here that we have lived our lives and raised our family. It is here that we want our sons to build their lives and raise their families. While I've worked in hundreds of political campaigns, my favorite kind of clients were those who shared my passion for challenging the establishment and the established order. I didn't always agree with everything they said, but I was attracted to their courage, the strength of their convictions, their willingness to speak truth to power, and their zeal to win hearts and minds in the marketplace of ideas on democracy's great stage. The endearing thing about this great country of ours is that ordinary men and women who have the courage of their convictions can walk freely onto the great stage of American political theater and play a part in the still unfolding drama that is the United States of America. There comes a time in the life of every American when circumstances compel them to do something they have never done before for the good of their family, their church, their community, their state, or their country. For me, that moment is now, and it is why I am running for the United States Senate in the state of New York.